Hi, it's Katrina.
Number 10. The Mushroom People. In a remote part of Eurasia, archaeologists discovered mysterious petroglyphs that date back 2,000 years. The rock images show ancient whale hunters who had an obsession with magic mushrooms. There is a variety of fascinating images: whale hunting, reindeers, dogs chasing brown bears, and dancing women with giant mushrooms on their heads. This is some of the rarest rock art in the whole world, and the only rock art in Russia discovered above the Arctic Circle. There are over 350 stone plains, each one covered in dozens of drawings and doodles. The issue for archaeologists has been getting to this spectacular ancient gallery. The only way to reach them is by taking a helicopter deep into unpopulated territory. The nearest town is over 3,000 miles east of Moscow. The most unique part about the petroglyphs is the mushroom obsession. Men and women are depicted in multiple scenes wearing huge mushrooms on their heads, or even with mushrooms instead of heads. Russian experts call this mysterious civilization the fly-agaric people and believe they had ample access to hallucinogenic fungus. This artwork was created by a remote group of early nomads who got high on mushrooms, painted, danced, and performed mysterious rituals. Number 9. SpaceX Junk. In 2022, a rather curious discovery was made in the remote Australian countryside. 3 huge pieces of space debris were found on sheep farms. According to the Australian Space Agency, the debris belongs to SpaceX. In the Snowy Mountains region of New South Wales, the space junk was found embedded in farmland. The 3 pieces had broken off the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft as it re-entered the planet's atmosphere on July 9, 2022. This was the same day that locals reported hearing a mysterious boom in the atmosphere and witnessing a ray of fiery light streak across the sky. One of the pieces of debris was 10 feet tall. A spiky piece of metal burned black from the heat during re-entry. Sheep farmer Mick Miners came across it, while his neighbor Jock Wallace found a separate chunk nearby in his own field. When they reached out to the Civil Aviation Safety Authority to ask what they should do with the shrapnel, they were told to contact NASA. It was soon discovered that the space junk came from an unpressurized trunk on the SpaceX craft. It was attached to the low side of the spacecraft and designed to carry cargo, and it was intentionally abandoned upon re-entry to make the return journey easier. Engineers had planned for the junk to land in the ocean, but instead it landed on farmland. It was lucky the pieces landed in the fields and not right on a farmer's house or their sheep. Number 8. The Swamp Boat. As the water in Lake Mead continues to dwindle, more and more strange things are being found in the middle of the dried riverbed. One of the more recent discoveries was a landing craft from World War II. It's called a Higgins boat, or a swamp boat, and they were famously used during the D-Day offensive in 1944. The reason for Lake Mead's continuing decline is drought. The water levels are dropping to unprecedented lows, and all kinds of bizarre things are being seen for the first time. Human corpses, sunken boats, even a body in a barrel. But the Higgins boat is in a whole league of its own. This was one of the most important military vehicles of the war. Over 23,000 of them were built during the 1940s to carry everything from soldiers to fighting equipment between ships and the shoreline. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, 1,500 Higgins boats carried troops from America, Britain, and Canada to the French beaches in Normandy. Unsurprisingly, the boat in Lake Mead has seen better days. It's been rotting underwater for almost 100 years, and it's largely decayed. How it ended up in the water has to do with what happened after the war. There was a surplus of military equipment, and much of it was sold off to private buyers. This particular swamp boat was likely used in surveys of the Colorado River. It was then sold to a marina and deliberately sunk as the anchor for a breakwater. At the time, the boat was 185 feet under the water. Today, it's at the surface. Number 7. Hunting reindeer. In Norway, a team of archaeologists recently came across a collection of relics scattered across the middle of nowhere in glacial ice fields. The discovery was made in the Jotunheimen region, where the two tallest peaks in the country can be found. In ancient times, the region was home to herds of reindeer who roamed for centuries through the valleys and across the mountains. These days, the reindeer are long gone, as well as the people, but evidence of them can still be found trapped in the permafrost and buried under the ice. Archaeologists didn't just come across one piece of human history, but many. There have been numerous discoveries here. They uncovered all kinds of ancient hunting equipment used by the ancient Norse to catch and kill reindeer. Archaeologists found over 40 hunting blinds, semicircles of rock walls about knee-high. These walls would have been used as cover by the hunters as they waited for reindeer to get close enough to shoot them with arrows. The researchers also discovered 32 scarring sticks. These were incredibly ingenious inventions. The sticks were set up with wooden flags at the tops, and those flags were meant to motivate reindeer to move in a particular direction. They would mount the sticks to try and force the animals closer to their hunting blinds. Researchers have also found a lot of arrowheads. They recently came across 5 iron arrowheads that date back to about 800 BC. They were either discarded or lost during hunts. Then they were frozen under the ice for almost 3,000 years. And now for number 6. But first, want to give a big shout out to Joshua Griffin and Greg. Thanks so much for watching. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe for more videos about amazing history. Number 6. Ghost footprints. In the salt flats of Utah, archaeologists stumbled upon a strange collection of footprints moving across the desert. The ancient ghost tracks only become visible after it rains. The footprints reveal themselves because they grow slightly darker in color when the ground is filled with moisture. Then, when the ground dries out, they completely disappear in the sun. Like so many others, the discovery was made entirely by accident. The researchers were driving to a nearby archaeological site at Hill Air Force Base in the Great Salt Lake Desert. They came across the footprints only because it had recently rained and the prints had momentarily revealed themselves. They then used ground-penetrating radar to see the full scope. They uncovered 88 footprints of ancient humans, including adults and children. The ghost trails were left behind anywhere between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. This was during the last years of the Ice Age, when humans first started to roam across North America. The people who left them could have been part of the very first tribe to ever live in what is now the United States of America. Number 5. Whales in the Andes. Scientists from the American Museum of Natural History journeyed to a remote mountain plateau in southern Chile. This is high up in the Andes Mountains of South America. Way up on the snowy slopes, researchers came across the fossils of whales and other marine animals. The fossils were found under a thin layer of sediment, and they had been there for millions of years. One of the really fascinating things about the Andes Mountains is how quickly they formed. 15 million years ago, violent tectonic activity shifted the Earth and pushed the Andes Mountains up from the bottom of the ocean and into the clouds. It happened quickly, over a span of only a few 100,000 years, maybe a couple million. Animals that had died in the 5 million years prior had their fossilized remains thrust up continuously over the formation of the mountains. When modern scientists found them, the skeletons had already ascended 5,000 feet above sea level. As for the animals that were discovered, there were a lot. The archaeologists uncovered oyster beds, sand dollars, fossils of whales, and more recent land species like prehistoric rhinoceroses, porcupines, and camels. Number 4. Lost cities in the desert. In the Sahara Desert, new evidence of a lost civilization has emerged thanks to satellite images. A team of researchers with the University of Leicester, England, used satellites and aerial photographs to identify what appear to be the remains of ancient structures in one of the most inhospitable places in the world. They identified roughly 100 fortified farms and villages, along with castle-like buildings and lost settlements, all of them in the sandy desert of Libya. They believe most of these forgotten towns and buildings date back to between the years 1 and 500. Due to the remoteness of the desert, the potential danger of taking a team into the territory, and a lack of general interest, these places are still a total mystery. Nobody has gone into the desert to excavate them, and so all of these lost cities are just sitting there undisturbed. This is a danger because it makes them vulnerable to tomb raiders and treasure hunters. By the time researchers are able to go investigate, all the best archaeological goods might be gone. But just who in the world built these mysterious cities? They were most likely constructed by a vague civilization known as the Garamantes. They lived in the desert 2,000 years ago and used a complex irrigation system to bring water to what is today an inhospitable region. They built great complexes with towering structures, protective walls, and all before the rise of Islam in North Africa. To the Romans, the Garamantes of the desert were barbaric nomads at the edge of their empire. But that wasn't the case. The Garamantes were civilized. They were farmers. They had their own towns and villages, their own language, and even advanced technology. But for some unknown reason, they ended up abandoning their cities to the desert. Number 3. Book in the Bog. Construction workers in Ireland discovered a 1,000-year-old book in the last place anyone would ever expect. It was pulled out of a bog in the middle of nowhere. A worker on a backhoe spotted the leather-bound book, paused to pick it up, and was shocked to see it was a book of Psalms. He was even more shocked when he saw the book was dated back to the year 800 AD. That makes it one of the earliest medieval texts ever found in Ireland. Experts immediately hailed the discovery of the book as one of the greatest in recent Irish discoveries. Pat Wallace, the director of the National Museum of Ireland, said the book is of staggering importance. It shows the richness of early Christian history in Ireland, although nobody is exactly sure how it ended up in the middle of the bog. The most likely explanation is that the book was written at a nearby monastery. This was shortly after Christianity became well established in Ireland in the 6th century, 100 years after St. Patrick. Somebody had to be carrying the book with them when something happened. It fell into the muck, and it stayed there until now. Number 2. Lost settlements beyond the wall. During the Roman occupation of Britain, from between the years 43 and 410 AD, the northern lands were never conquered. Iron Age communities fortified themselves in northern Britain beyond the area of Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian was the Roman emperor from between 117 and 138. It was around 122 when he began working on his famous wall, many fragments of which still survive to this day. It was meant to be a representation of the northernmost border of the empire. Beyond the wall was a country of barbarians and tribal savages, at least according to the Romans. They did manage to push a little more north to the Antonine Wall, but that was lost and the frontier fell back to Hadrian's Wall in 162. 2,000 years later, the area north of Hadrian's Wall is still a remote country. The bulk of Britain's population is in the south, near the coastline. Way up in Scotland, you'll find more sheep than people, and it's here, in this isolated landscape, that researchers with the University of Edinburgh recently discovered lost settlements from the days of Roman occupation. The researchers used LiDAR technology to scan the landscape and identify 134 indigenous settlements that had remained out of the reach of the Romans. However, the researchers believe there could be over 700 of those settlements still hidden in the unoccupied hills and valleys of northern Britain. These ancient communities belong to the hardiest of the Iron Age natives, those who fought against the Romans and prevented them from ever fully taking over the British Isles. Number 1. The oldest axe fragment. A piece of the oldest axe ever found was discovered by archaeologists in Australia. It was uncovered in the remote region of Kimberley in Western Australia, a fragment no larger than the size of a thumbnail. Yet despite this small size, researchers were able to date it back to the Stone Age, from between 45,000 and 49,000 years ago. That was at the same time humans arrived on the continent, and it's more than 10,000 years earlier than any other discovery of its kind. According to Professor Peter Hiscock from the University of Sydney, The axe fragment proves beyond any doubt that the first Australians were some of the first technological innovators in the world. There is no evidence of axe tools being used 45,000 years ago in Southeast Asia, where the original inhabitants of Australia came from. The discovery shows that when the humans first arrived in Australia, they experimented with never-before-used technology. As the first humans in a totally new world, the primitive people invented new ways that they could exploit resources. One of these new inventions was the stone axe. As for where the fragment was found, it was really in the middle of nowhere. Archaeologists in the early 1990s excavated it from a large rock shelter way out in the wilderness. The shelter was one of the first places occupied by early humans in Australia. It wouldn't be for another roughly 35,000 years from the invention of the axe that people learned how to practice agriculture. Thanks for watching! What do you think about the mysterious lost settlements beyond Hadrian's Wall? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!